Welcome, tennis fans, to the 22 episode of Tennis Traverse, Exploring the Game, the podcast that delves into the heart of the tennis world. I'm your host, Ivy J. In today's episode, I will be doing a Week 1 Australian Open summary and previewing Week 2 as well as predicting the winners. So before I start, please follow all of my social medias, that is Instagram and Twitter, using at Tennis Traverse, that is at Tennis Traverse. And if you're listening on YouTube, comment, like, and subscribe. If you're listening on other streaming platforms, please rate my show. And let's get right into today's episode. But before I actually get into today's episode, I want to apologize because I sound sick. I have a really bad fever. I don't know what's happening. Like last week I had a really bad cough and I thought like I was getting better, but I think it's getting worse. Just suddenly on Friday I was just like really dead. So sorry if it sounds a bit weird. And I figured I can't miss an episode, especially not during a Grand Slam. So yeah, I'm still recording regardless. And I guess now we can actually get into this Australian Open. So I feel like we can start off with the men's side first, just because in a way there's sort of less, not drama, but there's like less surprising factors considered. So, okay, what I'm like the format of this episode is I talked about round one, round two, round three, round four, and I predicted the winners. So, different rounds are associated with like different matchups that I think are amazing, and I will leave the link to the highlights down below if you guys want to go check it out. So, for round one, the first really good matchup I said was between Novak Djokovic versus Dino Prismic. So Dino Prismic is a qualifier and he's only 18 years old and his idol I believe is Novak Djokovic. And when Novak played against Dino, he said he was like playing against himself, as in like his younger self. He's like playing in a mirror, and I think that's really impressive from Dino because obviously Novak Djokovic is someone that's like sort of the anticipated winner of this year's Australian Open. So for him to give such a high compliment to someone who's 18 years old shows just how great the ability Dino Prismic has. And even though the final score was 3-1, it wasn't like a really nail-biting match, but to get a set out of Novak, especially if you're just a qualifier, is already a huge, amazing accomplishment. So through this Australian Open, I'll definitely pay more attention to Dino Prismic because I feel like I just like his energy on court and his passion for tennis is really evident. So I'll try to sort of pay attention to him more. And the next matchup I want to talk about is Roman Safiullin versus Griekspoor. So last episode I talked about how I was almost certain that Roman Safiullin will upset Griekspoor just because Safiullin has been doing so well since the end of last year, beating Alcaraz, and then this year in Brisbane he went to the semifinals, I believe, and Griekspoor on the other hand hasn't been doing that well. However, during the match, Roman Safiullin, he was up 2 sets. However, Griekspoor managed to turn it all around, which I find is just another sort of interesting thing about Grand Slams because for other tournaments, there's like 3 sets, right? Like, even if it's the men's side, you all play the best of three, but the best of five is so much different because obviously there's more rooms for you to make mistakes in a way, but there's also more rooms for you to sort of prove yourself. So I think best of five is a really sort of different way from how the other tournament is. So I guess that's why Roman Safiullin had trouble closing it out because in the other tournaments, right, if it was the best of three, he would already won after he won 2 sets. So I guess that's just something to think about. And the next matchup I want to talk about is Felix Auger-Aliassime versus Dominic Thiem. So I guess this matchup is what I said before. It's the matchup between two sort of underwhelming players or like players who we expected a lot from and we didn't get what we expected from, because Felix Auger-Aliassime, he's been battling with some injuries and he's just been underperforming in a Dominic team, obviously with his wrist injury and everything else. He's just hasn't been to his best level because he's a US Open Grand Slam holder. So it just shows how, I guess, even if we expect a lot and we feel like they have a lot of talent, sometimes they can just fall off. And this matchup, I guess, is a great example of that. So in the end, Felix Auger-Aliassime won, and it's a 5-set match, so the scores are really close. So Felix won the first set with a score of 6-3, the second 7-5, and then Dominic Thiem won the other two sets. The third set with a score of 7-5 in the tiebreak, and the fourth set with a score of 7-5. And then for the deciding set, Felix Auger-Aliassime managed to come back after his 2 sets loss and won by the score of 6-3. So yeah, I think this just is a really insane matchup, and a lot of people were saying how FAA is back. Well, I wouldn't agree that he's 100% back, because during this tournament he only made it to round 3 where he suffered a loss against Daniil Medvedev, so I wouldn't say he's 100% back, but he's definitely doing better than he was before, so I guess that's a really important thing, and I hope we can see more of him. Okay, and before I move on to the second round, I want to say I'm sorry because I feel like I'm sounding a bit off. I just don't have my usual energy, but it's because I have a fever. So I'm so sorry if that hinders your listening experience. But yeah. Okay, so now let's just move on to round 2. So the second round, I picked out 2 that I think are really amazing matches. The first one is Daniil Medvedev versus Emil Ruusuvuori. So this was an amazing matchup. Part of it is because of its circumstance. This matchup finished around 4 a.m. because before this match there was another amazing female players match that I'll talk about obviously later. But because of that, this match was sort of in a way talked about more, especially because Australian Open was trying to put out a policy that's increasing a day of the tournament to make sure that there's no late night finishes, but this match just shows that their policy didn't even work at all, because this match finished at 4 a.m. and I guess Daniil Medvedev, he lost the first two sets, and everyone was like, wait a second. And then Daniil Medvedev just came back. So, as I said before, I guess this is another thing about Grand Slams. Because it's the best of 5, every player has a chance of coming back. And I feel like because tennis is such a mental game, if you're ranked, for example, within the top 20, you guys almost have the similar skills. It's just more about mental, because for example, Novak Djokovic is always known for his ability to save match points and come back. So I feel like the top players, beside having a really strong technical game, they also have a really strong mental game. So I feel like that's why Daniil Medvedev managed to come back. And in the deciding set, he even bageled Emil Ruusuvuori. So I guess that just shows how if you're ranked top, within the top 10, you just have amazing mental strength in a way. Okay, the next match I want to talk about is Holger Rune's surprising loss against the French wildcard receiver Arthur Cazaux. Sorry if I mispronounced the name, but Holger Rune lost, and I don't know, I feel like Holger just hasn't been performing in Grand Slams as well as he was before. For me, I feel like every time there's a new Grand Slam tournament and he's a part of it, I just I don't expect much from him. By expecting much is I don't expect him to maybe be in the semifinals. I know he'll probably make it to around week 2, but I just didn't expect him to be really good, I didn't expect him to win. Even though he's ranked within the top 10, I just don't expect him to win. I don't know why. I think part of it is just because he hasn't been winning enough titles to make me be like, okay, I think he's actually a title contender, especially at Grand Slams where you have to win 7 matches in a row, you know? So, like, in the US Open, he lost in round one, and this year he lost in round two. So, I feel like that just shows how, I guess, in a way, even if you're like a top 10 player, it's really like it's hard to win 7 matches in a row, and that's why Grand Slam is such a special tournament. Okay, so now let's talk about third round matchups. So the first matchup is Andrea Maranino, sorry if I had to pronounce that wrong, versus Ben Shelton. So actually, before this match up happened, right? I always thought Adrian Maranino was such like sort of a person that like I know he's literally 35 years old and he just entered his top right sorry top high ranking like a week ago, but I didn't like expect him to have such a quirky personality. And after like going on Twitter, I realized how he like doesn't want the media or anyone to tell him his match, like who he's playing against, like a few hours before. Like, for example, right? He's playing against Novak Djokovic after he beat Ben Shelton, and he like doesn't want anyone to tell him that, except for a few hours before the game is played. And he doesn't believe in trying to like set individual game plans for individual person. So I feel like that's quite interesting. And he doesn't have any sponsors because he doesn't believe that they will give him good deals, and I feel like he's just a really funny player, and he's slowly becoming one of my faves. And yeah, I just think he's really, really funny. But he played against Ben Shelton and he managed to beat Ben Shelton. Both of those players are left-handers, and Ben Shelton, I've read somewhere, I think he never beat anyone who's also a left-hander. So that definitely plays in part. And I'll leave a link down below. It's a really sort of interesting matchup because Manarino is such an experienced player for being like literally 35 years old, and Ben Shelton is so young, so the dynamics between those two is kind of funny. And the next matchup I want to briefly mention is Grigor Dimitrov versus Nuno Borges. So like everyone had such high expectations of Grigor Dimitrov coming into this tournament just because of how he claimed the title in Brisbane. But to be honest, he's Krieger. He did not perform that well, and he lost to this person called Nuno Borges. I have no idea who he was before like this tournament, but I really like his style of tennis. It's really, really entertaining in my opinion. And yeah, so I think I will definitely also pay more attention to him from now on. And the next one is Casper Ruud versus Cameron Norrie. Well, unfortunately, Casper lost in a 4-set match against Cameron Norrie, but to be honest, I'm really happy with how Casper performed this year. I feel like he's definitely improved a lot. He's sort of not pushing or like not as defensive as he was last year, and I feel like it paid off because he's obviously doing really good, and I'm really happy for him. Even though he lost in round three, he did better than he was last year. And I feel like he's just in such good shape because last year when he was playing, I believe, I don't remember who he lost to, but I know he lost in round two. And this year he improved, which I'm really happy about. So yeah, happy for him. And then I guess we'll talk about round four. So round four, which happened, I believe was yesterday. The one matchup I want to talk about is Taylor Fritz beating Stefanos Tsitsipas. So a lot of people like underestimate Taylor Fritz, I guess. Well, me too, because I feel like he just doesn't win a lot of matches. Like I just don't hear much of him making it far, you know. But this year he beat Stefanos Tsitsipas in round four, which is super impressive, and I guess that's a really good thing compared to how he was before. So, because I believe last year he didn't even play in the Australian Open, if I'm not mistaken. So, I feel like he's definitely doing better than he was. And yeah, him beating Stefanos Tsitsipas, I guess, is a big deal because Steph last year he made it to the finals, right? Stefanos Tsitsipas, yeah, I'm pretty sure he made it to the finals of the Australian Open last year. So I guess this is just sort of a big drop from where he was last year, but he can't be mad at himself because it's round 4. So yeah. Um Now let's talk about the 2 quarterfinal matchups that we have, which is Novak Djokovic versus Taylor Fritz and Yannick Sinner versus Rublev. So I feel like Novak is definitely gonna win and Sinner's gonna win. And then for the final, I said before I talked about how I feel like Alexander Zverev will be another finalist alongside with Novak Djokovic. However, it changed my mind. I feel like Carlos Alcaraz is just in such good shape. I don't know why I underestimated him at the start of this tournament, but he's been doing so well, and I don't think he dropped a set actually. I think he's just been being really consistent, and on the other hand, I feel like Alexander Zverev is struggling a bit, so I think. Oh, never mind. Carlos did drop a set against Sonego in round 2, but he only dropped a set, and I feel like Alexander Zverev is just a bit up and down so far. So I feel like Carlos will beat him in the semifinals, and then the matchup between Novak Djokovic and Carlos Alcaraz will be an all-time classic, and I think Novak Djokovic will come out on top and earn his 4th title in a row here at Australian Open. So let's see if my prediction is right after next week's episode comes out. Okay, we should move on to the women's side first. Like, this women's side of Australian Open was insane. Like, I've never seen so many top 10 seeds exit like within the first 3 rounds of a Grand Slam. Like, it's actually insane. And there's so much stuff to talk about that I don't think this is enough. So, oh yeah, I also forgot. Like, y'all, like, actually go follow my Twitter because I'm sort of active on there now because of the Grand Slam. And this podcast, like, once a week, is just not enough for me to update you guys quickly enough on all of my thoughts surrounding this tournament. So please go follow my Twitter using @tennisstrippers. Y'all, like, it's actually a really good place for me to speak a lot about my opinions. So go follow me on my Twitter. Okay, let's just move on, right? Okay, so let's move on to round 1 women matchups. The first one I want to talk about is Naomi Osaka versus Caroline Garcia. I'm really sad that obviously Osaka lost in round 1, but to be honest, it's okay because Caroline Garcia played amazing and Naomi just had trouble. I feel like she was kind of slow getting to the ball, and I guess it just kind of shows her comeback rust, I guess. And to be honest, it was kind of sad, but it's okay because I feel like in the end, right, it's normal for you to not do really well on your first Grand Slam back, especially because you haven't played in such a long time. It's not just because you give birth, you stop playing for such a long time. And I don't think I'm making excuses for her because, yeah, I feel like she just has a really good mindset now. And I feel like even though she lost in round 1, she's gonna come back surely. And I'm really looking forward to see her actually coming back. Maybe this year at the US Open and I'll actually see her. Okay, so now let's talk about the second matchup, and that is Peyton Stearns versus Daria Kasatkina. So I love Peyton Stearns. I feel like I talked about this multiple times. I have a selfie with her at US Open, and I just like her style of tennis. I feel like she tries and fight for every single point she runs to every ball. And she played against Daria Kasatkina. It was a 3-set match. It was really close. I'm just really proud of her for giving someone who's like as amazing as Daria Kasatkina a really tough fight. And yeah, it's just really sad that her draw has to be like that because I feel like if she would had a better draw, she would definitely made it far, but it is what it is. Okay, so the next matchup I want to talk about is Rybakina versus Pliskova. To be honest, not even sure how they were like met in the first round because I thought Pliskova was a seeded player, but apparently not. And it was just an amazing matchup, and I feel like it gave Elena Rybakina a good chance to warm up against a relatively tough player. And it was just like a good matchup, so I'll leave the link down below. And I'll leave a link down below for all of these matchups in case you guys want to see. And then we'll talk about the second round. So there's just two things I want to mention. The first one is Elena Rybakina versus Blinkova. It was an insane match. It was insane. It was like arguably I feel like one of the best match this year. Were off the tournament because this year just started. But y'all, it was insane. So to sum up the match, Elena Rybakina, she lost the first set with a score of 4-6. She won the second with a score of 6-4. And entering the deciding set, they played a tiebreak. It's a 10-point tiebreak. And guess what? The score of the 10-point tiebreak is 22-20. Just let that sink in for a minute. It's like the largest tiebreak score of all time. Like, it was actually insane. Both players had so many match points, and in the end, Blinkova just managed to come out on top, and it's really sad for Elena Rybakina because this is a round 2 exit. And last year she made it to the final, so I guess I feel like really sad for her, but to be honest, she did get a Brisbane 500 title, and I feel like it's a mistake for her to play in the Adelaide tournament, even though she like probably wants to earn more points, but I feel like her scheduling may cause her this win because during Brisbane she actually bageled Arena Sabalenka, like the number 1 seed. It was actually insane. But I guess it is what it is. And it was just insane. But the other thing I want to talk about is how Jessica Pegula and Ons Jabeur both lost. I want to talk about Ons's loss, especially because she got bageled. The score was 0-6, 2-6. She lost to a 16-year-old Mira Andreeva, who I talked about before, how she was literally a day younger than me, but she literally bageled Ons Jabeur, who is her idol. And she's just such a funny person. I love her personality. I think it's because we're literally the same age that I relate to her a lot. But she's such a calm and person on court. And I like her maturity and where she places the ball when she's playing. I feel like she's really knowledgeable about tennis. Okay, so third round, I want to talk about how Iga Swiatek lost. So as you guys can see, a lot of top 10 players are losing. Not that surprising. Well, the Ons one is not that surprising, but Iga losing was still really surprising because she was on an 18-match winning streak, and I predicted that she will win Australian Open, even though I was kind of skeptical, but with Arena Sabalenka being bageled and Elena Rybakina's draw, I guess it didn't work out for her. On my bracket, Iga became the Australian Open champion, but I would never expected her to lose in the third round against Linda Noskova. But it was an amazing match. I watched a tiny bit of it, but when I was watching, Iga was leading. But the fact that how Linda Noskova has managed to like peak when she's playing against someone that is ranked number 1 in the world is actually amazing. And she came back, right? So she was losing the first set with a score of 3-6, but she managed to come back and win the last 2 sets. Is amazing considering how young she is. And another match I want to talk about is the matchup between 2 Chinese, which is Zheng Qingwen and Wang Yafan. It was an insane matchup, especially there's like been a lot of 5-setters and deciding set tiebreaks. I don't know why, but this Australian Open's just been kind of sort of in a way surprising, but it's also really fun. So Zheng Qingwen won in the deciding set tiebreak with a score of 10-8. Okay, the quarterfinal matchups I put is Krejcikova versus Sabalenka and Gauff versus Kotyuk. So this is the quarterfinal matchup that I guess is already made, and I feel like Sabalenka will win and Gauff will win. So this will just be, I guess, sort of how do I say it? Sort of like a rematch of what happened in the US Open final. But this year I feel like Sabalenka's gonna come out on top just because I feel like Coco Gauff, even though she's doing really well, I feel like Sabalenka, she's just on fire. She literally double bageled someone and she hasn't dropped a set, and I don't know if Coco dropped a set. Wait, let me search it up. Coco Gauff also hasn't dropped a set, but I feel like just in a way, even though all of her matches are also quite like one-sided, I just feel like because obviously, well, Coco also won the title. So to be honest, I'm not sure who might win, but I just think Irina will win because obviously she's the Australian Open defending champion. So she's probably more confident going into this match, and she probably wants revenge from what happened, and so that's what I set the semifinal matchup to for will be. And then on the other side, it's just kind of insane because all the seats are out. For example, Iga Swiatek is out, Ons Jabbar's out, Alina Rybakina's out. So like this side is kind of weird, but we have Azarenka, Svitolina, and Zheng Qinwen, which I think will like two of those will be the semifinal matchups, and I just hope that I think it's either gonna be Svitolina versus Zheng Qinwen or it's gonna be Azarenka versus Zheng Qinwen, just because I feel like those two players, like between Svitolina and Azarenka, they're both mothers, and not sure if that has to do with anything, but I just think because they're more experienced, I feel like they will come out on top. And but of course that doesn't mean anything because they're more experienced, because this tournament we've just seen so much of how even though a player is more experienced they'll still lose. But I just feel like it's either gonna be Svitolina or Azarenka in the semifinals. Wait, they will be in the quarterfinals. And then like I feel like it's gonna be Svitolina versus Azarenka in the quarterfinals, and the other one will be Zheng Qinwen and maybe Kalinskaya in the quarterfinals, and then it'll be Zheng Qinwen. And between Azarenka and Svitolina, I would say Svitolina, I guess, because she went to the final of the ASB Classic. So between Svitolina and Jing Qinwen, I don't know who's gonna win, but one of those players will play against Coco Gauff or Sabalenka. So regardless, I feel like it's gonna be Sabalenka who's gonna clinch the trophy again. So let's see if my predictions are correct next episode. Okay, that's all for today's episode. I'm so sorry if I sound off. Like, I know I'm sounding off. I keep on trying to hold back on my cough, but so sorry. And I really hope you guys enjoyed this episode. This Australian Open has been truly insane, and I feel like this episode doesn't do it justice. So if you guys want, please just go look at the video links I left down below for the highlights, because you guys will be truly blown away, especially by the Elena Rybakina versus Blinkova's 22-20 point tiebreak. So yeah, I'll see you guys next week. Bye.